All right, friends. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen so that we can delve into the sources for today. Here we go. I hope everyone can see it. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so as you can see, today I want to focus on repentance, or what is better known as teshuvah, and which is really the theme of this month of Elul, and delve into this topic and maybe even split into three categories so that we can have three practical tools on how to best prepare ourselves for the high holidays coming up in just, 3.5 weeks. First, let me clarify one thing, and that it's astounding to me, but there are three major Jewish themes that are at the center stage of this month and the high holidays themselves too, that come from Hebrew words that are mistranslated. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but number one, this theme of teshuvah, which is usually translated as repentance, really in Hebrew means return, because we don't believe in repentance. That's maybe a Christian word, it's not a Jewish word. Repentance in Hebrew essentially means, or in Judaism essentially means to return. To return where? To your true self. All that you need to do in order to truly repent is return to that neshama, to that soul, and allow it to express itself. That's one word. The second word that also is a theme of these high holidays and in this month is the word tefillah, which means prayer, right? That's usually how that word tefillah is translated. But tefillah in Hebrew does not mean prayer. It means to connect. And that again is because the true way of praying is by connecting to God, connecting from within, with my entire heart and soul to God. When I connect in such a way, not just recite words, not just have my mouthpiece moving, but really connect in a deep way, then I pray, then I connect, and then also my life is elevated. That's two. Number three, the third theme is the theme of tzedakah. And we say that tzedakah, these three themes, by the way, tzedakah, tefillah, and teshuvah, have the power to remove any bad decrees that may be upon us for the next year. So teshuvah, we said, is to return. Tefillah, we said, is to connect. Tzedakah is usually translated as charity, but it's not. Tzedakah in Hebrew comes from the word tzedek, which means justice. Because when I give tzedakah, I'm not doing that which I can do, or that which is nice to do. I'm doing that which I have to do. It's a just thing. Just like we receive, we have to give. That's how human beings have to function. We can't just take and take and take. My dear Rabbi Steinmetz calls that spiritual constipation. You only take and take and take, and you can't give. It's unhealthy for the physical body, and it's certainly unhealthy for the spiritual self. That's the way we are created. And the more we give, the more our muscles of giving, our heart, including our heart, right, is worked on. The heart is a muscle, they say. So the more you work on it, the more it expands. The healthier it is, the healthier you are. And that's the power of giving. We give and give because it's the just thing to do. That's the right thing to do. It's justice, tzedek, tzedek. It's not going beyond the letter of the law. It's the letter of the law itself. So these are three things that are at the center stage of this month and the high holidays that are unfortunately mistranslated. And we had to clarify them before moving forward. But speaking of the first of those three things, teshuvah, I'd like to divide this idea of teshuvah into three categories, not before going into the idea of this month of Elul, which again prepares us for the high holidays. This idea is so beautifully articulated by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi of some 300 years ago, the foremost Hasidic master, the founder of the Chabad movement, but also a Kabbalist in his own right. And he explains that this month is a month in which that relationship between God and the human being comes as close as could be, blossoms in the most beautiful way. Let's read the references. Does anyone want to read? I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. Anyone? Anyone? Oh, please, Julie, go for it.
Okay. I am my beloved and my beloved is mine is an immediate allusion to the month of Elul for its original Hebrew, ani ladodi vedodi li. The letters beginning each word serve as an acronym for this month.
Right. Okay, so that's the general idea. It's a month of love. I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me, speaking of God himself. But continuing on this thought, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Avladi says as follows. Continue, Julie, just one more.
During this month of Elul, the king comes out of his palace to the fields of his city. There, everyone who so desires is permitted to meet him. He receives them all with a cheerful countenance and shows a smiling face to them all. Later, however, after he enters his royal palace, no one can enter into his presence except by appointment, and only special people and select individuals. So too, by analogy, the month of Elul is when we meet God in the field.
Right. God comes out of his palace. We don't need 20 secretaries to make us an appointment, but God himself comes out to make his appointments with us. All we have to do really is come out of our comfort zone, come out of our homes, of our structures, spiritual structures, and sacrifice a little bit of ourselves, and then we'll meet God. And God will be there with a smiling face and a cheerful countenance, as it says here. It's a beautiful analogy because, again, it speaks of the tremendous opportunity we have during this month to come close to God and for God to come close to us. The question is, with what tools can we really come out of our homes? We're not speaking about coming out of our walls of the home here in Scottsdale or wherever you live. We're coming out really we're speaking about coming out of our spiritual home. The question is, how do you do that? How do you come out of your spiritual home? And for that, we need again to go back to the theme of teshuvah. And there are three ways in general that will enable us to develop those tools to come out of that will again ensure that we can indeed come out of our spiritual confinements and then go and meet God in the field, God who's waiting for us with a big smile. The first way, the first tool that speaks again of the power of teshuvah, of returning, really is hinted in the verses of the book of Samuel. Book of Samuel, maybe we won't read all these verses here, but the book of Samuel begins with God's revelation to Samuel, who later became a prophet, maybe one of the most dominant prophets of Jewish history. And the way Samuel appears in the Bible is quite interesting because first and foremost, Samuel was born to a mother, Hannah, who couldn't have children for a long time, and after praying in the most unusual way, her prayer was to have a child. Her prayer was fulfilled, and she gave birth to Samuel. She called him Shmuel. The Shmuel in Hebrew comes from the word listening. Shmuel, Shama'el, which means God listened to my prayer. But one of the conditions she made as she was praying for this child was that God, promise you, if you give me a child, I'll dedicate him to you for his entire life. She was blessed with this child, as mentioned. She named him Samuel Shmuel. At the age of 3, she said, I have to keep my promise. So she brought him to the tabernacle, to the temple, where Eli, the high priest, was at its head. And she says to Eli, look, this is a promise I made. God, I'm giving you my son. I'm dedicating him to God as I promised. Samuel then goes and moves at the age of 3, just imagine. Moves to this tabernacle, and he's now under the supervision of Eli, the high priest. In the middle of the night, one year, it's not clear how old he is, but according to the Midrash, he must be probably 9 years old. In the middle of the night, he hears someone calling his name. And he jumps out of his bed and he says to Eli, did you call my name? There's no one else here in the tabernacle. Eli, the high priest, says, no, go back to sleep. It was probably just a bad dream. Again, he hears his name for the second time. He again goes back to Eli. Eli says, no. And this happens 3 times. And after 3 times, Samuel goes back to Eli, and Eli says, if you heard this 3 times, it must have been God speaking to you. Next time you hear him, just say, here I am, Hineni, and you will hear what God has to say. That's what happens. Samuel says, Hineni. God appoints Samuel as the prophet. From that point on, he's endowed with this gift of prophecy, and he becomes not just a prophet to his surroundings, but a prophet to the Jewish people, and dare I say, to the entire world. Now, we read the story on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. That's the Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah. It's not the first day, it's the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Now, why do we read the story on Rosh Hashanah? The reason is I think, is because what God is telling us is that we too have inner voices calling us. And if we wish to actualize the meaning of Rosh Hashanah fully, then we too, like Samuel, have to be open and transparent enough to listen to those voices within calling our name, calling our vocation. That's what Rosh Hashanah is about. That's what Teshuvah is about. Teshuvah is returning not just to the self, but to the voices within you. And that happens to us, I'm sure, all the time. I'm sure you can testify to that. Sometimes we're about to make a decision in life, and we hear this voice that might even be irrational, telling us, no, you shouldn't do this. Don't go right, go left. We don't know why, but it's that voice of God calling from within. And sometimes it doesn't appear just at major crossroads. It appears sometimes in the little, maybe I shouldn't react like this in a knee-jerk way to a friend or to something that doesn't please my eyes. Maybe there's a voice telling me to just keep quiet. What voice is that? God again. And really the goal of Teshuvah is to be honest enough and be open enough to listen to those voices within and to follow them, even if sometimes they're uncomfortable, even if sometimes the vocation puts us in an uncomfortable situation. It doesn't matter. This is the voice of God, and this is really what this story conveys, a story again that is being recited on Rosh Hashanah to teach us the first message of Teshuvah. Maybe this is also why the Code of Jewish Law tells us that the very first way to begin the day, and that's, by the way, law, as you can see, law 1 in chapter 1, the way to begin the day is to remember that I have set the Lord before me constantly, which means that one should not be ashamed because of people who mock him. Why is that the first law of the Code of Jewish Law? Because Judaism recognizes that if we are honest enough to follow that inner voice time and time again, sometimes it will make us look weird. Sometimes it will make us look or make us stick out or make us follow or go against the stream of the norm of society. And therefore, then one should remember, don't be ashamed because of people who mock you. If you're following God's voice within, God's voice that appears to you from within, you have nothing to worry about. Yes, people may mock you, but at least you're doing what you are supposed to do, and that will lead you to living a purposeful and meaningful life. That's really the idea number one. Now, I want to share with you a story, and then we can develop this idea, and I'd love to hear your voices too. But the story about a Holocaust survivor who came out of the Holocaust bruised and scarred to the point that he said to himself, I don't want to have anything to do with Judaism. Judaism, to me, means suffering. I don't want to have anything to do with Judaism because I don't want to have anything to do with suffering. Now, you couldn't blame him, but he had children, and he decided to raise his children not in the Jewish way, not even to mention to them that they're Jewish. When his first son turned 13, something pinched him, and he said to himself, well, he should be celebrating bar mitzvah now. I know all about it, but I've never told him that he's Jewish, and I never told him that that should be his bar mitzvah now. But he said to himself, you know, I'm going to do something special. I'm not going to tell him that he's Jewish. I'm not going to tell him that he's bar mitzvah, but his 13th birthday, I'm going to take him to a store and allow him to buy any gift he wants. He takes him to a local store, an antique store, and he sees in that store a beautiful menorah. And the child, for some reason, is attracted to that menorah. He says, Dad, can you buy me this beautiful menorah? And the father tries to persuade him not to. He says, well, maybe pick yourself another gift. You know, again, he didn't want to introduce the Jewish theme to him. But the child is insistent and he wants to buy this menorah, and he forces his father to do that. He said, you can buy me any gift, please, Dad. Buy me this gift. His dad concedes and he buys that menorah. They get home. The child doesn't know what a menorah is. And he says to himself, gosh, this looks a little bit like a plane. And he starts playing with it, like a plane. And he throws it around, and at one point, the menorah breaks completely. Beautiful wooden menorah that breaks completely. And his father hears the noise, and he goes out and says, oh gosh, you broke the gift I bought you. What happened? What happened? Let's try to reassemble it. They try to reassemble it. And as they are doing so, they saw that there's a piece of paper that fell out from within the broken menorah that was buried within it. And they take out the piece of paper, they open it up, and the father reads as follows: I do not know where this menorah will end up, but know that I built it with tremendous self-sacrifice during this darkest period for us Jewish people, the Holocaust. I built it with the hopes that I could be lighting it for the upcoming Hanukkah. But I'm not sure this will happen. So I beg you, Whoever finds this menorah, light it in my honor. Light it in the honor of my family. Light it in the honor of the Jewish people that gave their lives for you. The man is stunned, but the signature of this letter was the signature of his own father. And he couldn't hold his tears back, and he said, you see, I try to renounce my Judaism, and yet my father comes from nowhere. It reminds me who I am, who I should be, and who my children should be. Right there and then, he decides to break it to his son that he's Jewish, that he bought him that gift for his bar mitzvah. And look, his grandfather came to save him and reawaken the Jewish soul within, so that he can too follow his pathways, because as he wrote in the letter, he gave his life for you. And in a way, I think that's the reality of life. Sometimes we are scarred by so many troubles and challenges that the voice within is shut. It's not that it doesn't exist, but we don't give him the privilege, the opportunity to sound itself. So it's shut. And then something happens. And by everyone, it's something different. But something could be something bad, something good. Something happens. It could be a bar mitzvah, or it could be the biggest challenge we've ever faced. And this voice says, I can't stand being shut anymore. And it shouts at us. And that happens very often during the high holidays, during this month as we prepare for the high holidays. Really? Is this where the direction of my life is going? And yeah, we are reminded once again, well, let's listen to that piece of paper within. Samuel listened to it. That's why we read this on Rosh Hashanah. And we too should listen to it. If we can listen to it, we'll be prophets in our own rights. We'll be ourselves. We'll be living meaningful and purposeful lives. And that's really, therefore, the first step of Teshuvah, enabling those voices within to really speak to us and enabling ourselves to listen to them so that we can best live our lives, our unique lives, the way God wants us to live. That's idea number one. I want to open this up. If you have any comments, questions, disagreements, please do so. Then we can move to tool number two. I shouldn't be the only one speaking. Anyone? Okay, fine. So we can continue tool number two if really there's no one else. No one? Okay. All right, okay. Fine. Julie, yes, did you say something?
Okay. No, I said I'll read.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let's go to tool number two. This speaks about the shofar, which becomes the symbol of this month. We blow it every day, and also the symbol of Rosh Hashanah. But let's speak about a specific aspect of the shofar that shares with us tool number two. Go for it.
Okay. What type of shofar should be used on Rosh Hashanah? Rabbi Meir says, the shofar used on Rosh Hashanah is made of the straight horn of a female mountain goat, or an ibex, or an antelope. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Levi say that we must use the ram's horn, which is always curved. What is the rationale behind the dispute? The first opinion maintains the principle that simplicity is best, while Rabbi Yehuda bases himself on the principle that the more a human being can bend his perception, the better it is. The law follows the view of Rabbi Yehuda. On Rosh Hashanah, we must use a curved shofar.
Right. So the shofars, as you surely know, are all bent. We can't use a straight shofar, just like this one right here, which maybe we'll blow at the end of the class for everyone to listen to the shofar. But that's the shofar. That's the type of shofar that must be used on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because this one is bent. Why must it be bent? Because the shofar's bent reminds us of tool number two, and that is that really in order to grow in life, in order to truly return, in order to live a divine life, we too need to bend ourselves from time to time, which means we too need to say to ourselves, well, maybe I'm not the only one that's right. Maybe there's another opinion. Maybe there's someone that can truly enlighten me. Yes, I think I'm the best. I think I'm the only one. I think I'm the Einstein of the generation. I think I know it all. But maybe, just maybe, I should bend myself like the shofar is meant a little bit to listen to someone else, because maybe, just maybe, that someone else might be even more right than I am, might enlighten me in ways that I couldn't have enlightened myself. That's really what the shofar is. You know, there's a great book called Why Marriages Succeed and Fail, an old one, or not so old, 1994, but it speaks about the vital. There are two things that are vital in every relationship. One is that we share common values, and two, we're not going to read the reference, but two, that we're able to recognize that we don't always have the truth on our side. That not everything that we think is really. Maybe the other person is, maybe my spouse is right. Maybe my friend is right. Maybe I didn't see the world this way, and really he's enlightening me. Those are the two, after years and years, after 12 years, if I'm not mistaken, of research, these are the two conclusions that Dr. John Gottman achieved. And that again is because he understood what the Talmud and the sages teach about the kavod the shofar, that in order to come close to ourselves, to truth, to God himself, we too need to bend ourselves. I want to show you a nice little cartoon, but maybe that expresses this idea in ways that no one else can. But can you see this? 6 or 9? It depends. So what is that digit? Is it a 6 or a 9? So it depends on which side of the street you're standing on. Again, everyone has two perspectives, but it doesn't mean that if I think it's a 6 that I'm right. Maybe it's a 9 from a different perspective. I just didn't have the courage, the humility to look at things from that other perspective. That's really what this is about, to go out of ourselves into the others and understand life from their perspective, to almost make that 180-degree shift from year to year, to be able to see life in the eyes of others. I think that unfortunately our society is so polarized, especially in politics, but even beyond politics, that we have lost this art of taking just a few steps right here to the other side and seeing things in a different way. Maybe I'm not right. Doesn't matter whether I'm from the left or from the right, whether I'm Sephardic or Ashkenazic, whether I'm Democrat or Republican, whether I'm Israeli or American or Chinese, doesn't matter. Maybe I ought to have the courage to cross over to the other side and see the world in a different perspective. Maybe then, even if I do that, maybe I'll still believe that it's a 6, but at least I will have had the enlightenment that the other has. I'll be able to see the world with other eyes. It can only enrich me both intellectually and also soulfully. So why not? And I think that again is truly missing. But we are speaking about returning to our true self, not just as individuals, but as a society. That second tool is as vital as could be. And I'm reminded again of a different story. It's a story that was related by Yocheved Brookstein, who experienced the story herself. Yocheved Brookstein is a woman that lives, I believe, in New Jersey, and she remembers of how when she was young, she was sent to a camp called Chedva in New Jersey also, I believe. And one day her grandfather came to visit her on visiting day. And she takes him around the camp. Maybe I shared the story in the past, maybe I did not. But she takes her to he wants a tour of the camp, to show her the camp, show him the camp around. And there are many other parents and grandparents there. And then Chedva is walking with her grandfather. And all of a sudden they bump into a friend of hers from camp and her grandfather. And Chedva realizes that her grandfather's eyes lock with the eyes of her friend's grandfather as if he knew him. But all he did is he nodded, and then they continued to walk on. So Chedva, after a while, asked the grandfather, who was this man? It looked like you knew him. Father said, it's a long story, it doesn't matter. He says, who was this man? He says, he says to her, if you really want to know, it was my best friend before the war. The Holocaust survivor before the war. So if it was your best friend, how come you don't hug him? And she persisted, didn't want to tell the story, but he finally said, fine, I'll tell you what the story is. I was living in Romania. Romania was overtaken by the Nazis in 1941 thanks to the fascists that controlled the government in 1940. Forget his name. But we saw this coming, her grandfather tells her. And I managed with tremendous self-sacrifice to obtain visas to get me, my wife, my child, my parents, my in-laws out of the country to the safe side of Romania, or to the other side of Romania, not out of the country, to the other side of Romania, or the safer side of Romania. No, I obtained those visas, hid them in my drawer. No one knew about them, except for my best friend, the guy you just saw. He was the only one who knew about them. The night before we are planning this escape, I go to the drawer to make sure that these visas are still there, and they are not there. They're nowhere to be found. I look for them everywhere. No one can find them. And I said to myself, I didn't move them. Who could have known about this? The only person who could know about this is my best friend. So immediately he ran to his home. He knocked on his door and he saw that no one was there. No one. So he said to himself, gosh, where's my best friend? And he started becoming more and more suspicious. And he realized after some research that his best friend had stolen those visas and had himself escaped with his family to the safe side of Romania. Now he was stuck. Not only was he stuck, but the next day the escape did not happen. He couldn't go to that safe side without visas. A few weeks later, the Nazis came in and they tore his family apart. His own wife and his child were murdered at Auschwitz. His family, his in-laws, his parents, they were all murdered in different places. He was the sole survivor after 4 harsh years at Auschwitz. Now the granddaughter Chetva says to her grandfather, wow, what a story. Now my question is to change. Not why didn't you hug him? Why didn't you punch him in the face? That's what I would have done. What's wrong with you? He was responsible indirectly for the murder of all of your family members. Yes, you remarried. Yes, you had children. Yes, you had grandchildren. You had me, but still. And the grandfather says, no, it was a different world then. Everyone was under this terrible trauma of the Nazis. I don't justify him, but I somewhat understand what he did. And I don't look back. It is what it is. He's not my best friend, obviously, anymore. Let him live life. I've moved on. He's moved on. That's what life is about. Chetva was stunned by the story, but at the same time, she understood a lesson that probably stands as one of the most important lessons of life from her grandfather. And that is that, yes, we move on. Life moves on. We have to move on. And sometimes we have to curve ourselves a little bit, like the chauffeur, to understand the other person's perspective, whether we think he's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. But to understand the other person's perspective, and maybe that will help us move on. And whether it does or not, we still have to move on and live the life that we can live. Not live the life that someone else can live, or live a life that's in the present, but to live a life that we can live right now, not in the past, but in the present and in the future. That's really maybe a story that epitomizes best this idea of curving shofar. And tool number 3 to return to teshuvah is called the duty to love. But again, I'm going to open this up for any questions, comments, disagreements. I feel like I'm monologuing today. Anyone? Yes, Janet. But you got to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
You mentioned this story, and it's so hard for me, and I'm a pretty forgiving person, but it's so hard for me to see how someone could just be okay with that. I mean,
right. Look, I think it's a great question.
How do people become that? I mean, I'd like to have more of that in me. How do you become that?
Right. So, great question. I think, looking at this man also, whoa, what a hero. That's like superhuman strength. But I think there's 2 perspectives. One is a rational one. And the rational one says, okay, fine, I'm upset. I'll punch him in the face. And then what? And what's going to happen? Is it going to change it? It's going to bring my family back to life. What is it going to do? It's not going to do anything. It's just going to pull me into this mud. So why get dirty? That's the rational aspect. And the more spiritual aspect is saying, well, I'm only hurting myself at the end of the day. It's bringing into my life toxicity. So why even dwell on it? It's almost like a wound, right? The more you play with it, the worse it becomes. Just the more infected that place can be, and eventually maybe your entire body can be. So why play with it? Spiritually speaking, it's infecting me too. I think that's another perspective we have to look at things that helps us act in that way. And I know it's hard.
It makes sense. I was going to say it makes sense, but it's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah,
what you say makes a lot of sense, but it's emotions that are involved, and when emotions get involved, they take over common sense.
That's right, and that's why we can't. That's the hard part. Remembering what Judaism teaches, that the number 1 foundation is having our mind control our heart. As it says, Moach shalit al halev. Our mind has to control our heart. We can't let our emotions get the better of us. Sometimes if we feel that they are, then maybe let's go out for a walk. Let's go jogging. Let's go, swimming. Let's do something, and then maybe calm down and revisit it.
Rabbi Allouche,
Yes.
it's Sue.
Oh, yes, Sue.
Well, you know how you talk about forgiveness?
Yes.
Should he have forgiven him?
Maybe he did. I don't know the details of their conversation so well. I mean, I know what I shared. Maybe he did forgive him.
But that's the Jewish way, right? To
Right.
forgive?
Yeah. I mean, eventually it is to forgive, absolutely. Yeah, or to say to Hashem, you know what, Knight, the ball is in your court. I've done my part, I've forgiven. You deal with it the way you want to deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. All right, very good. Anything else? Anyone? No? Okay, so let's go to step 3 or tool 3 for Teshuvah. Julie, you want to continue to read, or anyone else? Anyone? No? Okay, go for it.
Okay. We're starting with Teshuvah or to laugh.
To laugh. Go
Okay.
for it.
To laugh. The reading of the first day of Rosh Hashanah relates the story of the birth of the first Jewish child to Abraham and Sarah after many years of waiting and struggling. And when the child is finally born, his parents give him the strangest name. Abraham named the son, whom Sarah bore to him, Yitzchak, which means laughter or comedy. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me, all who hear laughter for me. All who hear shall laugh for me.
Right. Okay. So that's the first reading of Rosh Hashanah. We speak about laughter. Now, you may ask, 1 second, if it's a day of self-reflection, if it's a day of Teshuvah, does laughter really have any place? Really? Are we going to be speaking about laughter? And in a way, yes, it does. It has a very, very big place. Why so? So let's continue here with the words of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And this is the reason why laughter is so much needed.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Life offers us this opportunity each day of our lives by providing us with tests or challenges, some of them easier, some of them real curveballs. Why do some of us endure challenges so disturbing, painful, and shattering? Nobody knows. All we know is what our calling and response must be: to laugh. The function of every challenge, small or large, is to invite us to go much deeper into ourselves and excavate our full inner radiance, discovering the resources and potential we need to muster to face these tests and triumph over adversity. Then we will truly be able to laugh.
Okay, beautiful. So what makes the difference between an overcomable challenges and what is the difference between an overcomable challenge and an unovercomable challenge? I think it's the choice that we make, whether we will choose to laugh through it or not. Now, some challenges are not overcomable, but that laughter in a way enables us to control them and to somehow channel them in the best of ways. That ability to say, you know what, it's not gonna overcome me. I'm still gonna live through it. I'm still gonna dance through it. I'm still gonna laugh through it. That in and of itself minimizes the challenge and makes it overcomable. And that's what Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi here teaches us. That yes, challenges are painful and disturbing and so on, but it's our calling and response to laugh, like he writes right here. And in a way, I think it's true for small and big challenge. You know, Viktor Frankl famously said that everything can be taken from man. Viktor Frankl, who too was a Holocaust survivor, who wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning, as he was inspired during the Holocaust at the concentration camps by his fellow Jews, that the only thing that really kept them living was that search for meaning. Everyone was saying, when I come out of this, I'm going to have a meaningful life by doing so and so. So he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, Man's Search for Meaning, he says that everything can be taken from man except his ability to choose his attitude. That can be taken away from him. You can choose your attitude right now. If your attitude is your attitude of laughter, then the challenge is overcomable. And this is what this is saying. You know, Helen Keller, who, as we all know, was blind, was once asked what it feels like to lose your eyesight, to not have an eyesight. She says, that's not so bad. What's worse is losing your vision in life. If you can't have that vision of seeing positivity, of fighting through, of picking an attitude that is an attitude of laughter and perseverance at the same time, then really you've lost it all. It's much worse than losing your eyesight. And I want to share with you yet another story, but I have a dear friend I know from South Africa, from my upbringing in South Africa from the age of 8, but a little bit older than me, but his name is Kivi Bernard. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a jeweler who became a world famous motivational speaker. He wrote a book called Leopardology, which speaks about the specific business approach based on the behaviors of leopards in the safaris of South Africa. It's an interesting book, but he's been asked by every big company to speak for them at different conferences. Of course, before COVID. Remember the times of conferences and of convention? Seems like centuries ago. But he was also asked to speak at a very big conference that Microsoft was putting together. And unfortunately, the conference, they wanted him as the keynote speaker, but the conference fell on Shabbat. And he said to them, well, I'm sorry, it's my holy day. I can't speak for you. They didn't know what to do. They brought an executive chairman to come and speak to him to say, look, we'll double your pay. Just come and speak. We can't change this date. It's been organized already for a year and a half. Please speak for us. And he said, look, I can't do it. Shabbat is Shabbat. I respect the Shabbat. No money in the world will be able to convince me. You can triple my salary, quadruple it. It doesn't matter. Finally, they were able to change it to a Sunday. He came and he spoke at the conference. At the end of the conference, one of the top chairmen of Microsoft come and approaches him and says, look, I was the guy who was trying to persuade you to speak for us on Shabbat and offered you double your salary and so on. And I was so impressed and so inspired by your conviction that not too long ago, I was on Bill Gates's private jet with him on our way to meeting. And I shared the story with Bill Gates. And Bill Gates responded as follows, saying, look, I have all the money in the world. I can buy almost everything, but there's one thing I can't buy. I can't buy a Jew's values. That does not allow him to speak for us on a Shabbat. That I can't buy.
Wow.
That is admirable. He speaks about, you can Google it, but Kivi Bernard speaks about this exchange and what an impact it had even on Bill Gates. But reminded of the story again, because yes, we have all sorts of challenges, but it's our ability to say, well, you know what, I'm going to choose the attitude of my values. My values are values of Shabbat. My values of laughter. That's what I'm going to choose. That money can't buy. And I would dare everyone to make a list of not things that they own that money can buy, but things that they own that money cannot buy. What do you own in that department? And if laughter is one of them, laughing at every challenge, because that money can't buy, then you will have acquired tool number 3 of Teshuvah and Rosh Hashanah, and the year ahead will certainly be the most meaningful and purposeful one. I want to, speaking about making lists, I just want to evoke the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who so powerfully said that during this month, we are so inspired of taking good action, but it is our ability to take a snapshot, like he writes here, right here. I'm just going to read the last lines. Take a snapshot of yourself at that time when you're inspired, when you say, yes, I have to take this upon myself. Take a snapshot of yourself at that time and frame it and hang it up on the walls of your heart, or better yet, the walls of your bedroom. Revisit it in your loneliest moment, at times when you struggle to define your real values. Each time, if we can take a snapshot of ourselves now and make those lists and really devote ourselves to them, then no doubt our year will be as meaningful and as purposeful as could be.